My name is Katie Hammond and I'm the Volunteer Engagement Officer for the Museum of Oxford, which is a local authority museum. I was part of the Growing Volunteer project in 2020 and it was a really lovely group of other volunteer managers from different museums all coming together, led by Carol Carvane. Our main motivation for joining the Growing Volunteer pilot was around numbers. So we've only just reopened our new museum. We really needed enough volunteers to welcome people into the museum. So I guess that was the primary driver. But more importantly to myself and I think my colleagues was the idea of diversifying the volunteer pool. We're a museum about the people of Oxford, so it makes sense to reflect the demographic of the people of Oxford. So some of the actions that I took on from the Growing Volunteers pilot, I think some of them are about a change in mindset and a change of viewing volunteers or potential volunteers. One of the key things that really stood out to me from Carol was the fact that we didn't have to accept warm bodies. Now what I mean by that is people who are just there, are just present, who don't interact with anyone and they're just there to sort of monitor the museum. So it's about reframing the way of thinking of, oh, we need this many people to come in and cover the shift. It's about the people that you get in the first place and making sure they have the necessary skills to offer a really welcoming experience to people coming in. Another really helpful idea that Carol introduced to us was the idea of recruiting for a specific role. Before we could be a bit sort of slapdash and just sort of open it out to anyone, it was that warm bodies, the idea of recruiting warm bodies to sort of be placeholders in the museum. Whereas now it's much more rigorous, so we recruit for a specific role and there are specific skills that we look for in volunteers. So we decided to commission a race equalities audit which was focused on our volunteer pool. So the audit was comprised of a consultant who also happened to be one of our young volunteers, basically analysing all the data, all the policies, looking through it and seeing where our weak spots were. So we were fortunate enough to have money from the Heritage Lottery Fund that we could put towards this, but considering the amount of work that this consultant put into the process, it's very little, it's very affordable. So a small grant would probably see you through to be able to afford to conduct your own race equalities audit on your volunteer pool or another aspect of your organisation. The impact of the race equalities audit was huge. I think the most important thing was it really reframed myself and the team's mindset about how we tackle race inequality in the museum. Most importantly, as an all-white team, it's about decentering our whiteness and elitism. So first, by reframing our mindsets, we were then able to make practical changes and to really see what we could change for the better. The internal response to the audit was really positive, so all the museum team were really on board. So I think what really helped was the timing of the audit. So if it had been a different year and if we hadn't been reeling from the murder of George Floyd, then we probably wouldn't have commissioned this, which is upsetting to say now because it's led to so many important changes. So I think the audit really changed our perspective on how we approach inclusivity in the museum. I think it's a big mindset change. It's about double thinking. It's about questioning everything we do and asking ourselves the question, are we including as many people as we can? Are we leaving anyone out? Are we making anyone powerless in what we're doing? So I think the audit has completely changed the way we recruit volunteers, manage volunteers and retain volunteers. So starting at the very basic, in terms of marketing, it's really changed the way we think about how we approach and attract racially diverse volunteers. So thinking about what's appropriate marketing material, where do we put this, how do we reach people, and thinking about using our community contacts as a way of getting people into the museum and to see that their stories are reflected in the museum. One of the really seemingly small but important details that our consultant picked up on was the use of application forms. Now previously we had asked for all the demographic details when the potential volunteer put in an application. So we'd ask for quite a lot of personal details. This was to if I'm honest, to make my life easier, to make sure I had that information that I could then use for evaluation. But it reduced the person down to their demographics rather than the person themselves. So we have removed asking those demographics until a later stage, and now we focus on the person. So we ask the person for their name, so we need some information, and then we ask them why they're interested in volunteering, what skills they feel they might be able to bring, and their relationship to Oxford as well, because that's important to us. So the next step after they have completed the first application form is to have an informal conversation, either in person or online with me. These are really lovely. I think it's one of the highlights of my job, having these conversations and really getting to know a person before they come in and volunteer, and to find out what they're enthusiastic about. It's so important. Also, it's an opportunity to talk through why we're collecting demographic information. Again, this is something that our consultant picked up on. It's then a case of, if they feel like a good fit for the role, then sending them another application form, which then asks for more demographic details, which we need for evaluation purposes. Once they've gone through that process and they've filled in that form, they can then come in for an induction. Now, this is quite a long induction, much longer than we previously done, but the Race Equalities Audit and the Growing Volunteers pilot really helped to make me realise how important this induction is. We want volunteers to be confident and feel trusted when they volunteer for the first time. They are taken on a tour of the museum, they are shown how the interactors work, we talk through expectations and what expectations they have on us, we talk through the policies. The second part of the training is about customer service. We sit together and we talk through different scenarios where volunteers might interact with difficult visitors, which I think they found really helpful, and it allows them to think about their actions before they're faced with a potentially tricky situation. So one of the most difficult obstacles we faced while trying to diversify our volunteer pool was time. So we started the Race Equalities Audit in January 2021. It was completed in July 2021. This is all while trying to prepare for reopening in October 2021. So you can see that our time was pulled in all different directions. But this was, in a way, an asset, because it helped to focus on those changes and to make those changes in the policies that we knew we had to change anyway. So in a way, that was sort of helpful. It gave us the kick up the bum to get things moving. Another potential obstacle was the financial cost. So we were very fortunate that we were able to pay for our consultant using some money from the National Lottery Heritage Fund and Arts Council England. So my advice for other museum teams wanting to diversify their volunteer base would be to accept that it's a long-term change. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of your time. If you are an all-white team, make sure to look inwards before you try and make change outwards. Don't be afraid to be a good troublemaker. So make sure to question things. If you think something might be a barrier, it really might be. Try and think about ways you can reduce the barriers to all people, not just people of the global majority. It is hard hearing where you've gone wrong, but you need to take it on, accept it, apologise if you've caused any upset, and move forward and do better. Ultimately, it is so worth it to do this work. It is hard work, but it means that you have a stronger volunteer pool, you have stronger relationships with everyone, and you can instill a sense of belonging and ownership over your museum. So our plans to continue this work in the future are manifold. We've got an action plan that we put together after talking with our consultant and our consultant sharing best practice with us. Another really important and really exciting plan we have is for allyship training, which is led by a trainer who was recommended to us by our consultant. This will take place on Zoom from the start of next year, and I'm hoping our volunteers will come along and be open to evaluating their own actions and thinking about how they can instill a sense of belonging and positive relationships with visitors, volunteers and staff alike.